Hey everybody, and welcome back to Critical Crafting. This is Dylan, your crafting GM here. Today I'm going to talk to you about another combined crafting and 3D printing thing. When I first got into 3D printing, one of the big topics that I was looking at all the time was layer lines, and essentially how having a higher layer height you get more layer lines, and as someone who is fairly particular about things, they rub me the wrong way a little bit. So I've been looking to try and find a way to both still print fast with larger layer lines and still be able to cover them up somehow. So while I was working with Daniel Herrero on our latest Kickstarter, The Lost Adventures Volume 2, we made this huge building, and up until this point, I had not printed anything at a fairly high layer height. Everything was low layer height, took forever to print, but it was really detailed. I saw this thing and I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to do something different because that is going to take forever. So just wanted to show you guys today some cool ways to both do some transitional painting as well as to hide some of those layer lines. Before I jump right into the craft, I'm excited to talk a little bit about the Kickstarter I've been creative director for. Myself, as well as a ton of other super talented people, have been pouring our hearts and souls into this thing for a long time. It's finally out there, and I just kind of want to share a little bit of it with you. We have incredible terrain, some really cool, unique looking buildings, some dynamic characters, awesome monsters. We've got maps, we've got a little bit of everything for everyone. So it's something that's going on right now. If you want to check it out, that would be awesome. Backing is a great way to help support me as well as some of the other awesome artists that participated in this project. So if you're interested, there's a link in the description. Hope you check it out. Without further ado, let's get crafting. So as I was saying, I normally print just about everything at 0.12 for my layer height for terrain. But when I opened this file and realized it would take up pretty much the entire ender, I decided to take a look and see how long it would take to print first. Not a good sign. Not a good sign. Oh, come on. Oh, no! Taking the layer height to 0.2 significantly decreased the amount of time needed to print, but I knew I was going to have issues covering the layer lines. Just like any model, I'm going to base paint this, but the big difference between painting this and most other things that I paint is I'm going to apply the paint incredibly thick. The paint is going to soak into some of those little lines and help to coat them or cover them so that when I go and do a little bit of other work on the raised portions, they don't pick up so much. That's what's going to help to fill in some of those gaps between the layers, and you can do a little bit of extra work highlighting and not have to worry about it so much. Dry brushing and washes are the two things that almost everybody avoids when painting a FDM printed 3D print, because dry brushing will pick up the raised parts of the layer lines, and if you do a wash, it'll soak into the grooves and show those off. What I found is if you kind of do what I jokingly refer to as a wet dry brush, where you leave a lot of the paint on your brush, but you apply it in kind of a flicking, softer manner so that you're not getting deep into the grooves, you can still apply a sort of dry brush and cover up some of the stuff that's showing the layer lines. I like to apply a lot of different coats and layers doing this so that it helps to distract the viewer from, oh, there's a layer line here. You're adding some transitions of color that help your piece feel more dynamic, and it helps to kind of detract the eye away from the fact that there are layer lines there, a sort of illusion. I've also found that you can do washes. The big thing is to just make sure you're only applying them in indented areas, grooves and that kind of a thing, and not over the entire piece that you're working on. This is going to help because it's going to be dark anyway, and people aren't going to pick up on the fact that there's some grooves there. So those are ways to do both kind of dry brushing and kind of some washes on here, but this brings us to what I really want to talk about, and that's transition painting, or a sort of thick wet blending to help and hide the layer lines on your piece. Wet blending and blending paints in general is a really good skill to have when you're working with any kind of miniature or piece of terrain, but I found that it's especially helpful when applied thick and working with a FDM printed piece, because it allows you to make transitions in color, show shadow, show highlight without using dry brushes or washes. And what that's going to do is help to hide a lot of those layer lines. I'm I'm going to show you a few examples in this video that should help you with just about any piece you're working on. One of the best pieces of advice I can start with when you're doing this technique is start light and then go dark. You can go the other way and you're going to do it from time to time, but what I find is that dark blends much more easily into light than light does into dark. If you screw up, it's okay, you can go ahead and paint over it again, but it's easier to start out with the light one, transition to the dark. Trust me on this. What you're seeing me do here is just that. I'm starting out with a yellow, which is the lightest thing I'm going to have on this canopy, and then I'm going to transition it. All that I'm using for this piece is 3 colors: an apple barrel yellow, an apple barrel orange, and an apple barrel red. The technique is extremely easy. All you're doing is applying the first coat, thick and wet, of whatever your lightest color is, then using a transition color and putting that on top of partially the original color, leaving some of the light, and then lastly putting your darkest color on. You can do this with any number of colors. Once you have those base coats on, that's when the fun kind of begins. So you can see I'm now blocking in my darkest color. When you first lay these down, don't worry that they're not transitioning well. They're going to have this sort of a blocky look to them, and we're going to transition them in a little bit here. But again, light colors to dark colors, you're going to see those lines, and then I'll show you in a second how we transition this. Once all of my colors are on there, I'm going to work back through them again. So I've done my red, now I'm taking orange, and I'm literally blending the 2 lines between them together. Just pulling that orange up into the red, or pulling the red down into the orange. You'll notice that it's a lot easier to pull a dark color than it is to pull a light color. But the transition ends up really nice if you play with it long enough. I do the exact same thing with my yellow, pulling that up into my orange. If I pull from the orange down, it's going to make my yellow darker, whereas if I take from the yellow and pull up, that's going to lighten up my orange. This is something that takes some getting used to, but over time you'll figure it out. The last part of this process is kind of intuitive. You'll find that there are some areas that didn't quite blend right and you need to go in and fix them up. Sometimes you can just use a plain brush with no color on it to blend in between, and you're just going to find that you intuitively figure out the more that you do this. This is a great technique because not only does it help hide layer lines, but it can be used with a variety of colors and applications. Wet blending one coat of something is fairly easy, and canopies can be done that way. But what about something like the waterfall on this piece? This is a bit more tricky. First off, you start like you normally would. I have already done exactly what I did with the canopies on this piece, transitioning from lighter to darker colors. Now what I'm doing after it's dried is doing another wet blend on top of it, but I am paying much closer attention to all the raised and lowered areas of the piece. This allows me to add greater depth to it and another layer of color and variation that I wouldn't having just one layer that's all blended together. While it seems kind of silly to be doing the exact same thing and another layer over top of it, it's not. What you're going to find is that on your first layer, it's going to kind of all blend together. So if you have something that has raised areas and ridges and that kind of a thing, it's not going to have those pop out as much as you would like to because it's going to really blend. But the big thing is that this is going to allow you to get those areas to pop. It's sort of like your replacement for dry brushing, the thing that was going to give you those highlights, and your replacement for washes, the thing that was going to give you those deep areas of darker color. What you're doing instead is putting sort of a base layer on there that's all been kind of blended so everything looks good underneath, and then doing a smaller bit of blending on top of it in specified areas that give you a very similar and really, really nice effect when you're done. This is another technique that is going to take you a little bit of time to perfect and figure out on your own, but once you're done, you're really going to like it. And that's it! Transitional blending for hiding 3D layer lines is not that difficult. It's just something that will take some time to hone and practice, and once you get the hang of it, it's actually a lot of fun and kind of calming to do. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do check out the Kickstarter, like and subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you all next time on Critical Crafting.